What beyond just the hypocrisy of the lack of transparency, what kind of scandalous things are going on in these email accounts, you know, under the names of Richard Windsor? What's going on that needs to be hidden?
Well, we'll find out. What we know is somebody asked me, what do you expect to find in this and 3 other lawsuits we filed? I expect to find the things they apparently didn't want us to see. When you create your alias accounts, you move over to Gmail or AOL, these are things your behavior suggests indicate you don't want revealed. What we've seen is execution of sleazy deals with drug companies to get $150 million in advertising for Obamacare and $4 billion to them under the bill. The Solyndra program. So generally things that on their face were the kind you wouldn't want publicly revealed are the kind they're moving over to the more difficult to find but still within our reach so long as we find out about them accounts. But remember, Will, the progressives were right. They got this one right. Governmental authority and taxpayer dollars can be abused, and as the Supreme Court noted in their discussion of this law, the Freedom of Information Act, this is a cornerstone of a democracy. The public has a right to know, as the Supreme said, what their government is up to. We must care because this is very important. The progressives told us so.
No, I just want to say I think Chris is right, but I think for these kind of arguments to ever resonate with the public, you need to draw out for them what the consequences are. If you tell them an alphabet soup of federal laws they might have violated, you're going to lose any kind of emphasis in that.
We need access to the emails.
So let me boil it down. It's sneaking around. And sneaking around behind the taxpayers' back. And Tara, I worked on the Hill for Senator Frist. You work for a congressman. You know that you are supposed to conduct government business on the government email address, and conducting it on a private email address is not allowed. It is misconduct.
That's right. And my boss, Congressman Rohrabacher, was on that letter from the Science Committee. And, you know, this is completely unacceptable. And this type of circumvention just highlights the disregard for the will of the people that this administration has. You know, Chris just mentioned Solyndra was talked about on these emails. You know, what about the enemies list? Remember that with this administration? What else is being discussed? Why are they circumventing this? This is exactly why we have laws like the Federal Records Act. This is why we have FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, so that the American people and the media, where are they? Things like this should be investigated and discussed, because isn't that the role of our media and our public officials like the Congress? They have an investigative role. Every major committee has an investigative subcommittee. They need to find out what they're doing and why they're doing it, and how is this hurting the American people? What are they hiding?
And as a former staffer, I can tell you, you know you're doing something wrong if you're using your private email address to conduct business.
They knew exactly what they were doing.
It's not just the FOIA issues, Anthony. You know, this administration also started the National Declassification Center in 2009. They said they're going to get through 371 million pages of information that was classified to declassify it. Now they're saying not so much by 2013. In fact, I think they might hit 30 or 40 million by the end of their own timetable here. The government is just, this government particularly, is obsessed with secrecy. They just don't want people to know things.
Well, it's just yet another example of all sorts of wonderful promises coming from from the election, or in 2008, coming into the administration and realizing, oh, secrecy is a good thing when you actually have power. And so, you know, holding a light to this is incredibly important, not just because of this administration, because the next administration is probably going to do the same thing. I mean, these email accounts, some of them went back to the Clinton era, I think is something we were talking about before. This is something that systematically governments do. And the Obama administration is nothing new. They are nothing special. They are obsessed with secrecy, just as the Bush administration was and the Clinton administration before that. And this is a great time, particularly, I think, for conservatives to hold the candle here and keep it here for whatever future administrations come.
Chris is obviously trying very much to do that. But Chris, I wanted you to tell the audience about some of the hurdles that have been put in your way. I've heard things like, for example, it's expected that you will pay, or rather anybody requesting a FOIA act will pay for what could be the outcome of that. And you don't even know how large necessarily the outcome could be. It could be 5,000, 50,000 pages. Is that correct?
Well, it depends on the request, but I'll tell you about an example that's now pretty egregious in the context of the carbon tax. But I'll tell you, first of all, they are different. We found, look, this is a violation of the criminal code. That's what distinguishes them from the others. When you're destroying federal records, which is what we found. I have an affidavit filed by the Department of Justice, and it was their defense for not turning over records, and they explained we have a very elaborate document destruction operation. That's criminal on its face, and they shrugged their narrow shoulders and walked away. In the case of the carbon tax emails, they admitted they had thousands of pages of emails about something they don't discuss publicly. And they said, but you see, disclosure, the balancing here, the disclosure wouldn't benefit the public because we'd have to stand all day at the Xerox machine photocopying 7,000 plus emails. I looked it up. The E in email stands for electronic. In fact, you don't photocopy emails. You generally just copy them on a disk for a quarter. And they want thousands of dollars. They're throwing fees in the way of nonprofits when the precedent is very clear. You're not allowed to do that. They're also charging us thousands of dollars when they've ignored our request, when the courts have made clear, if you ignore the request, don't bother trying to charge fees. They're making up spectacularly absurd, comically exaggerated arguments simply to keep from us records that, again, as somebody pointed out, they've moved over to accounts that they didn't expect us to find, or they were talking about thinking we'd never ask, setting up code names, dead drops. They're doing this because they don't want us to know what they're up to, and that's precisely the kind of information that we need to see. We've never seen anything like this, so far as I know. That Nixon fella had some problems, but other than that, the left is saying that these guys are way worse than Bush. And if progressives are admitting this, I suggest we listen to them.